all of those thoughts. So, kind of following along that same line of thinking, do you have particular recommendations about who should be part of the team that looks at recovery and reopening and crisis management for a particular faith-based organization, particularly what parts of the organization or parts of the community should be represented in that kind of an effort, and how do you recommend that they operate together?
Amy, did I hear you correctly? Who should be part of the team to think through reopening? Was that the correct question?
Yep, that's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah, so again, that's going to vary from organization to organization, but it might make sense to include some folks who maybe aren't just part of your institution, right? So one thing to consider is if there's multiple organizations in the area, sometimes we live in silos and don't speak to one another. The more common the approach across the community, the better it is for everybody. And so if you have, peer faith-based organizations, not necessarily just of your denomination or your faith, but just others in the area that are looking at the same reopening timelines you are, the more commonality there is in your approach, the more the community is going to better understand what to do and what's expected. That's one thing to consider is working with others in your community. It's also important to consider, are there local officials from your local health department, local government, maybe local law enforcement that can also be part of that to bring in their expertise and their perspective, some of the things we might not think through just with our organic staff or volunteers. Some of us have expertise in one area and not another. So if you can diversify that group a little bit, bring in law enforcement's perspective, bring in the health professionals' perspective, bring in other experts from your own community that really understand and appreciate your community, your needs, and your situation, that's going to really help think through this most effectively, because you don't want to put out guidance that you think makes sense, but actually might not comply with local requirements, ordinances, whatever it might be. So definitely some broadening of your community, definitely some integration of local experts really can help that along.
A note for those of you who are talking about having issues with opening up the links and clicking on the links that are in the reopening guidance checklist. Maya just sent me, and I just added to the handout section another version of that. So it's called Reopening Checklist V3. That one, the links appear to be working just fine. So if you've had issues with the links, please do grab that from the handout section here before we are done with the webinar today. For those who are asking how you can access a recording of this webinar if you're not an InfraGard member, it looks like we'll be able to also hang it off of the Faith-Based ISAO website. So more to come. I'll send out language that tells you exactly where to go about that, along with the email you'll get tomorrow confirming your attendance. So 2 little administrative items for you right there. Now back to a very specific question from one of our attendees. From a virus standpoint, it is much safer to have services outdoors in our parking lot, but our synagogue usually keeps doors locked for security purposes. How can you secure an outdoor space? Or how do you evaluate the trade-off between safety from infection and security from attacks? Any thoughts about how to balance those issues?
Well, I'll speak to the security aspect of it. I believe clearly the guidance has been that if you can conduct a service outside, everyone is far better off. The trade-off is unless you have a secure outside area, fenced in and secure, it is a trade-off. I can visualize how that would occur in my house of worship, and others are clearly far different. But it's going to be a trade-off, and in my view, the only way to ensure some sense of security with an outside service, if you don't have an enclosed area, would be to have sufficient personnel around the perimeter just to be vigilant and keep an eye on things. But that would not prevent someone determined to conduct an attack, should that be the case. But absent that, I think you can more or less secure the outside area with sufficient personnel. But it is a trade-off.
Yeah. If I could add to Rob's comments, sure, right on. I think a lot of you have probably hosted outdoor events, maybe picnics or seasonal events or celebrations. So you're used to maybe doing that to some extent, but it is challenging. Again, very much of this, a lot of this is going to vary from community to community. If you're in an area or if your organization has done anything to potentially increase those stressors in the community, if you opened ahead of your local timeline, for example, there might be folks in the area that are not pleased with that decision. If you're applying safety measures that maybe some in your community don't care for, if there's any reason to think there's a greater concern for your faith-based organization, then you want to think through those additional safety and security concerns and prepare yourselves accordingly. So hopefully there's some experience with securing that outdoor area. That is really important because you open up so many more avenues of approach. Even when there's a fence, someone deliberate can take advantage of opportunities, as we saw in California last year with a fairgrounds attack. And so you want to be really sensitive to your local environment. What are your local concerns? You want to make sure that you are communicating any threats that may have been received for any reason with those that are supposed to be providing security. And it's a really good idea to talk to your local law enforcement or your local fusion center and understand from them if they're aware of any general threats or concerns that you should be thinking about as you may conduct not just outdoor services, but services in general as part of reopening. It's really important to talk to those local leaders, understand what are they seeing, what are they aware of, and how might that factor into your own reopening safety and security procedures. Back to you.
A couple of technical questions now for the group, specifically about masks, given the pandemic we're all living through. So first question, should greeters or security team folks wear N95 masks? Or is it acceptable to have them wear surgical style masks? So that's question one. Question two, have you thought about an area in the foyer or the entryway to the organization where people could remove their mask briefly so the church has a video record prior to them entering the sanctuary? Any thoughts about either of those two?
Rob, do you want to take those or should I?
Well, the N95s, I think certainly if someone has access to N95s, they're more protective than are the regular surgical masks. I think that probably what you'll end up seeing is people with the cloth masks, most people wearing those. I think personally those are better than the paper thin surgical masks that don't form as good a fit. The N95s are certainly better. The question about the greeters, I think that's a decision that the faith-based organization needs to make. I know that a lot of guidance says do not have greeters, just let people come in and go to wherever the seating is available based on the precautions and the distancing is taking place inside. As for the area in the vestibule coming in, bear in mind that enclosed areas that do not get ventilation are more apt to retain the aerosols and the droplets that will not get flushed out. So if people are coming in taking their masks off in this confined area, then that's a little more dangerous. If it's well ventilated, there's ventilation coming through the area there, that's different. But I think that's a decision that the local organization, the religious facility, is going to make based on the public health guidance.
That's spot on. If I could also just add a little bit to Rob's comments, I think absolutely to his last point, what type of mask and whether you can take it off or not, at the end of the day, we completely support following health guidance. So if depending on what your local jurisdiction is telling you to do that as far as wearing a mask, unmasking at any point or not. On the point of greeters, while you want to minimize contact, and so it makes sense to maybe minimize those opportunities for engagement, at the same time, to address the concern of security not knowing who's coming into the venue, you can't really over communicate as folks are coming in at this point. So not to say you should or shouldn't have greeters or others engaging personnel, but that first person, if they're aware of potential indicators of concern, and our friends at DHS and others have got some great guidance on things to look for and watch for in those types of encounters, it can really help in identifying, is this just another person coming in? Maybe just from that top half of their head, you can probably identify if it's a regular attendee at your place of worship. If it's somebody new, you might get an indicator before they enter your inner area of the facility. Is there anything concerning about this individual? Is there somebody we have to maybe monitor a little bit more closely or not? It's the same type of things that greeters and ushers may be doing every day, parking attendees and other support staff may be doing every day as part of your security protocols. And right now, because folks are masked, and that does create some security concerns, having somebody that can initially see them, get eyes on, and just make a very quick assessment of this does not appear to be a concern, or something seems awry with this individual, the way they're dressed, something protruding from their clothing, they want to enter with a backpack and that's against your policy, whatever it might be, it's not a bad idea to find some way, whether direct engagement or observation, to at least identify personnel coming in or out of your venue. The mask just added additional complexity to that. But again, at the end of the day, please comply with local guidance on health practices and requirements.
Thank you all for all of your answers to all these questions. We didn't quite get to all of them, but we are a minute past the hour, and I do want to be respectful of folks' time. So thank you to all of our speakers, Rob, Maya, Jorina, and Andy. Maya, I'm going to turn the mic over to you for just a really quick final wrap-up, if you'd like to add a few words before we all cover up.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate everyone's time and encourage people to use the checklist to reopen facilities safely and securely. And if my team or I could be of any service to you in that endeavor, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can use the email on this last slide here. Thanks again for your time. Back to you, Amy.
Thank you, Maya, and everybody else. Appreciate everyone making time and space today to join us. I know we didn't get to every single question. If you still have questions that you want answers to, you're welcome to send them to us, and I'll forward them on to the group. Easiest way to reach us is events@infogardncr.org. Couple of administrative items as well. When you leave this webinar, you will be linked to a survey. We do ask that you share your thoughts, the good, the bad, and the ugly with us. We do read every piece of input that we get, and it helps us determine what additional topics might be of interest to folks to help keep them safe and secure, both at work and at home. Remember that you will get an email tomorrow that confirms your attendance today. I will add language to that to confirm, if we can work out the details, that a recording of the webinar will also be hung on the FB-ISAO website so that those who are not InfoGuard members can access the same information there as well. If you are interested in more sorts of learning opportunities like this, InfoGuard is a great thing to join. We do a lot of webinars. We're up to about one a week, if not two a week, just from our chapter, and there are many other chapters across the country as well. Really appreciate, again, everyone's time today. Hope that you all stay safe, wash your hands, and we'll look forward to the next time we see you online. Thanks, everybody.